If I asked you, what are the oldest man-made structures on Earth? What would probably come to mind are the pyramids or Stonehenge, or one of the many other impressive ancient stone ruins. But for us to truly discover the oldest structures built by humans, we have to go in search of the home of the earliest humans on Earth. Because if we find this so-called cradle of humankind, we are surely to find the structural evidence of those earliest modern humans that walked the Earth. So, where is this cradle of humankind? It is generally agreed by scientists and archaeologists that the earliest humans emerged out of southern Africa somewhere between 200 and 300,000 years ago. This has been supported by genetic studies on the mitochondrial DNA in females that suggest the same. Modern humans first emerged out of southern Africa somewhere between 170 and 300,000 years ago. It is truly amazing that the oldest written records ever discovered, in the form of thousands of inscribed clay tablets left behind by the earliest civilization on Earth, the Sumerians, tell us exactly the same thing. In fact, many of these clay tablets that predate the Bible by as much as 4,000 years tell us in great detail how and when the first humans appeared in southern Africa, how they lived, and what they did. And while we accept most of what the Sumerians tell us in these clay tablets they left behind, strangely enough, the information about early humans has been disregarded by most scholars. So, not only do we have scientific evidence, but also an historic account of where the first humans came from. The South African government spends millions of rands promoting the concept of the cradle of humankind. Tourists get taken to Maropeng and Sterkfontein caves and shown a bunch of fossils as evidence, like Mrs. Pless and Littlefoot, which are very impressive fossils, but they have nothing to do with Homo sapiens. These are great examples of Australopithecus, a hominid creature that predates humans by between 2 and 5 million years. So this is actually a misnomer, and these places should rather be called the cradle of hominid kind, because no remains of Homo sapiens have ever been found at Sterkfontein caves. So where is the real cradle of humankind? Where is this evidence of these early humans and what they did? What we are told is that around 60,000 years ago, the first humans left southern Africa and moved north, eventually populating the whole planet. The question remains, where did they live and what did they do for several 100,000 years before the great global trek? At about 80,000 years ago, we see the emergence of what seems to be human consciousness, when people began to paint elaborate images on cave walls, making beads, and carving images in stone. The beads and carved ochre stone recovered from a cave at Blombos in the Western Cape, South Africa, has been dated to around 80,000 years. This is arguably the oldest artifact found to date made by early humans. Many thousands of cave paintings by so-called San or Khoisan people have been discovered, and some dated back to the same period. This example of a cave painting in Zambia was dated to be 30,000 years old, but the paint fragments collected from the cave floor below show to be 400,000 years old. This only highlights the fact that our dating techniques are not always as accurate as we think. A fascinating site discovered in northern Botswana, called the Python worship site, has been dated to around 70,000 years. What is fascinating about this site is that it shows early humans in the act of worshipping a snake. This is a very important bit of information, because there are 3 common denominators throughout all of human history that cannot be separated from human activity, and these are the quest for gold. Man and his gods have always been obsessed with gold and mined it in various ways. Even since the book of Genesis, shortly after the creation of Adam, God shows his lust for this shiny metal. Secondly, slavery. Mankind has always practiced slavery, been enslaved, or enslaved others. The amazing thing is that the gods in all religions seem not only to condone the act of slavery, but they often give the slave masters instructions on how to punish their slaves and even allow to kill them if they've really misbehaved. The final common denominator is the winged serpent, or feathered serpent, or flying serpent. Every ancient civilization speaks of this mythical creature that came out of the sky, gave life to people, and taught them all they know. This creator god was also known as the medicine god. He was known as Enki in the Sumerian mythology, one of the three gods in the first Holy Trinity ever worshipped, and his ancient symbol is still used as the symbol of modern medicine today. So this snake worship site in southern Africa is paramount to the presence of early humans in this part of the world, and the earliest worship of the same gods as the Sumerians and other later civilizations in the north worshipped. And so we begin to find the earliest evidence of what modern man did in this part of the world, a long, long time before mankind ever migrated out to populate the rest of the planet. But what other evidence of early humans do we have? Scattered throughout the mountains of southern Africa lie over 100,000 stone structures. Modern historians have often called these just cattle kraal of little historic value. It is said that these ruins are the remains of Bantu tribes when they began arriving in southern Africa from the north in the 13th century AD. In reality, the obsession with these ruins goes back about 500 years to the first Portuguese explorers who were mesmerized by the many ruins they discovered on the maiden journey into the African heartland. The sheer number of these stone structures defies any logic and does not tally up with the historic population numbers in southern Africa. The ruins are mostly circular. Some of the walls still stand over 3 meters tall and over 1.5 meters wide, and the most impressive ones are always at the tops of mountains. These stone ruins are not just isolated structures. They form part of large settlements surrounded by endless agricultural terraces and linked by ancient roads that have been tracked for over 500 kilometers, even in their ruined state. Many have been destroyed by development and forestry. Some terraces resemble the ones at Machu Picchu of the Incas in Peru. Early archaeological evaluation suggests that some of these terraces may be older than 5,000 years. This complex of mysterious ruins covers an area larger than 150,000 square kilometers, and the ruined complex at Watervalboven is larger than Johannesburg today. But what is so special about these ruins? Many of them aligned with north, south, east, west, the solstices, equinoxes, while others show signs of highly intelligent design and knowledge of advanced geometry. There is also overwhelming evidence of the presence of Asian gold miners and merchants as far back as 2,000 years ago to the birth of Christ. Dr. Cyril Hromnik has spent 30 years researching this link and presents much evidence. Hindu shrines known as dolmen are scattered throughout the hills and inside many ruins. This ruin is built in the shape of a well-known Hindu symbol of fertility. Some artifacts suggest that these Asian traders, Arabic, Hindu, Chinese, may have been here as far back as 2500 BC. And what was the purpose? It was always about gold. Thousands of ancient gold mines have been reported over the past 500 years, and new ones are being discovered all the time, even by ourselves. But is there one ruin that can pull all of this into perspective? A flagship among all of them that can be dated? Yes, there is. The most important and impressive piece of stonework in the ancient world. We call it Adam's Calendar, the oldest man-made structure found to date on Earth, and the centerpiece among the ruins that gives them all a purpose and meaning. This African Stonehenge was discovered by Johann Heine in 2003, by accident, as it always happens. The entire site stretches for over 2 kilometers and consists of the north site, the southern site, and the main site. The main site of Adam's calendar was originally a circular structure, which can still be seen on satellite photographs. The main and central dolerite monoliths weigh about 5 tons each and are perfectly aligned to the movement of the sun. This is the oldest stone calendar on Earth, older than the Sumerian calendar, which started 3760 BC. This calendar also marks the beginning of the year with the rise of the sun on the spring equinox. It is aligned to the north, south, east, west, winter solstice, summer solstice, and the equinoxes. The wooden pole was placed where the stone man stood. We call him the oldest statue on Earth. The stone man, who observed the rise of the sun in the east, was removed in 1994 by ignorant individuals, but was miraculously saved and placed at the entrance of the nature reserve. One of our objectives is to return him to his place of origin. The tree on the right has grown next to the north marker stone, and the tree on the left marks the southern stone. The two main central monoliths are aligned so that the taller one casts a shadow on the surface of the flatter, wider one, and we can track the days of the year as the shadow moves from the one edge to the other. On the solstice, it reaches the edge and it turns and moves back across to the other edge of the calendar rock. Notice how the taller calendar stone was cut to allow the setting sun on the winter solstice to cast a shadow on the calendar stone. This is the view north, which dissects the central calendar stones. And this is the opposite view south, perfectly placed to dissect the central monoliths. We noticed that about 1 kilometer directly north of Adam's calendar, a very suspicious-looking tree growing alone and out of place. Upon closer inspection, we discovered that it was an ancient stone altar, or possibly even a grave of a powerful king, on whose grave sacrifices and rituals would have been performed. But the mystery deepens even more. All along the edge of the cliff, stretching for about 1 kilometer, lie over 100 dolerite stones of various shapes and sizes. Almost every one of these stones shows signs of carving, chiseling, and shaping in some way. It is as if this was an ancient school or workshop where monoliths were prepared and shaped for specific ritual purposes. A ritual path runs between these monoliths, linking all 3 sites of Adam's calendar, and passes by another stone man who presides over some important ritual in days gone by. But how do we date the stones? How do we determine its age? You cannot carbon date rocks, so we have to look at other scientific clues that point us in the right direction. We looked at the following: magnetic resonance and alignment, soil shift, geology, erosion, lichen growth, archaeoastronomy, stellar alignments, and even psychic revelations. The magnetic fields of monoliths differ dramatically from that of the bedrock, which suggests that they were brought here from another location. Thousands of years of soil shift has caused most of the monoliths to fall over, except the few central stones which were most crucial in the structure and were most likely buried deeper than all the others. The geology of the site gives us the first real breakthrough. The site is situated on the edge of a cliff which is called the Transvaal Escarpment, which is known as Black Reef Quartzite, rich in gold and other metals. But all the monoliths are dolerite, and the closest source of dolerite is between 500 meters and 1 kilometer away from the edge. This means that someone went to a great deal of trouble bringing hundreds of these monoliths here, carved them and shaped them for a variety of uses, including the building of the calendar site. Erosion is a great indicator of how long these stones have been lying in their positions. The best example is a rock we call the skull, and we assume that it was full and uneroded, like all the other rocks, when it was brought to this site. Most geologists will agree that this level of erosion would take many thousands of years, probably well over 100,000 years. Lichen is the whitish organism that grows on the surface of rocks. This particular species is known to grow at about 1 millimeter per annum under perfect conditions. It would take about 2,000 years for this lichen to cover this monolith from side to side. But these two monoliths are covered by multiple layers of this lichen. A more scientific analysis of these lichen layers will most likely show that it has been growing here for many multiples of 2,000 years. Archaeoastronomy is one of the best indicators pointing to a great age of the stone calendar. When observing the calendar from satellite images, it is instantly noticeable that the north-south axis is not aligned with 12 o'clock or north-south on a current map. This means that whoever built the calendar must have done so at a time in history when the north-south alignment was different to that of today. After measuring the site, we established that the current north-south alignment is out by 3 degrees, 42 minutes and 17 seconds. We know that the planet Earth is inclined on its axis at 23.5 degrees. At this angle, it wobbles like a spinning top, and it takes 25,800 years to complete one of these precessional wobbles in a clockwise direction. So this means that every 25,800 years, the north-south will realign to the point of departure, roughly speaking. It seems that the planet is just more than 3 degrees away from realigning with the current north-south, at which point it would have completed its 25,800-year cycle, or multiples thereof. This is where it gets really interesting, because we know with a certain amount of confidence that the calendar is at least 25,000 years old, or multiples thereof, give or take a few thousand years. It is therefore the erosion patterns that suggest the site is older than just 25,000 years. Many ancient structures are aligned with Orion's belt, like the pyramids of Giza, the Mayan pyramids, the pyramids in China, and even the Great Zimbabwe ruins. Could Adam's calendar also be linked to Orion? We noticed 3 monoliths that had fallen down the eastern side of the outer circle, and we believed that they were not accidentally placed in their original position. Our suspicions were rewarded because we realized that these monoliths are actually aligned with the rise of Orion's belt when it rose flat on the horizon, which would have been at least 75,000 years ago. So we have a number of indicators that suggest the calendar is at least 75,000 years old. An interesting coincidence is that the Great Pyramid of Giza, Zimbabwe ruins, and Adam's calendar are all built along the 31-degree east longitudinal line. And finally, 6 independent psychics have given us exactly the same historic information about the calendar site. Whether we believe in psychics or not, this poses an interesting scientific fact. The statistical probability that they could have given us the same information is about 50 billion to 1. So, as it stands, Adam's calendar is the oldest man-made structure discovered to date. It takes us closer to the emergence of humankind than ever before.